You've been told a story about where money came from, and you've been told it so many times, in so many textbooks, that it never occurred to you to doubt it. The story goes like this. Once upon a time, before money, people bartered. You had a chicken, you wanted a pair of shoes, so you found the shoemaker and haggled. But barter was clumsy. What if the shoemaker didn't want your chicken? So one clever day, humans invented money, a neutral thing everyone would accept, and trade became smooth and easy, and civilization took off. It's a clean story. It's in economics textbooks right now. And there is one problem with it. It never happened. Not once, anywhere on Earth, in any society we have ever studied. The real origin of money is stranger, older, and considerably darker than the fairy tale, and by the end of this video, you'll understand that money was never invented to make trade easier. It was invented to do something to human relationships that had never been done before, and you are still living inside the consequences every single day. Start with the barter myth itself, because it's worth knowing just how baseless it is. The story traces back to Adam Smith in 1776, who simply imagined that early humans must have bartered, and asserted it as fact. Every economist after him repeated it. But when anthropologists actually went looking for a barter economy, a society that ran on trading goods directly before inventing money, they found nothing. Cambridge anthropologist Caroline Humphrey put it bluntly: no example of a barter economy, pure and simple, has ever been described, and there is no evidence money ever emerged from one. The scene you were taught, the chicken and the shoemaker haggling, is not history. It's a thought experiment that got mistaken for a memory. So if humans didn't barter their way into money, what did they actually do? The answer, worked out in detail by the late anthropologist David Graeber in his book Debt, The First 5,000 Years, is that credit came first. Long before coins, before cash, before anything you'd recognize as money, people ran their lives on debt. Not debt with numbers and interest at first, but the loose human kind. You need help building a roof, your neighbors show up, and now there's an understanding. You owe them. Someone shares meat from a hunt, and the rest of the group remembers. These were webs of obligation, tracked entirely in memory and reputation, exactly the kind of who owes what social bookkeeping the human mind is unusually good at. For most of human history, that was the economy. Not coins changing hands, people keeping mental accounts of one another. Then something shifted, and it shifted first in the temples and palaces of ancient Mesopotamia, more than 5,000 years ago. As settlements grew into cities, those cities needed to track enormous flows of grain and labor, far more than any one person could hold in their head. So the temple administrators of Sumer did something quietly revolutionary. They started writing debts down. On clay tablets, in cuneiform, they recorded what each person had contributed and what each person owed. These tablets are among the very first writing humans ever produced. Sit with that for a moment. One of the original reasons our species invented writing was not poetry, not history, not prayer. It was to keep track of debt. And to write a debt down, you need a unit. You need to be able to say how much is owed. So the Sumerians standardized one. The shekel, originally, wasn't a coin at all. It was a measure of weight, a specific quantity of barley, later silver, used to express the size of an obligation in the temple ledgers. This is the real birth of money, and notice what it actually was. Money didn't begin as a shiny object you traded. It began as a unit of measurement for debt. Before you could hold money in your hand, money existed as a number in an account, a way of saying precisely how much one person owed another. That word, precisely, is where everything changes. This is the twist the barter myth completely hides from you. Before writing debts down, human obligation was fuzzy on purpose. If your neighbor helped you for 3 days and you helped them for 2, nobody was counting that closely. The vagueness was the point. It kept people bound to each other, always slightly in each other's debt, which is another way of saying always in relationship. A gift that can be exactly repaid ends the relationship. A debt that lingers keeps it alive. That fuzzy, generous, unquantified web is how humans held communities together for tens of thousands of years. Money took that web and made it exact, Suddenly, an obligation wasn't a feeling between two people who knew each other. It was a number, and a number does three things a favor never could. It can be measured precisely, so there's no more vagueness, no more generosity built into the ambiguity. It can be transferred, so a debt you owe to your neighbor can be sold to a stranger who has no relationship with you at all. And it can be enforced, coldly, by someone who doesn't care about your story. That is the actual invention, not a medium of exchange. A technology for turning the warm, blurry human sense of owing each other into something hard, transferable, and enforceable. Money didn't grease trade. It converted relationships into arithmetic. And once obligation became a number, that number could do something obligations between friends never do. It could grow. This is where the story turns genuinely dark, because the same Mesopotamian societies that invented written debt also invented interest. A debt of 10 measures of barley became 11, then 12, compounding with each season, and unlike a favor between neighbors, it did not fade with time or goodwill. It accumulated, and when a farmer had a bad harvest and couldn't pay, the debt didn't disappear. It came for whatever he had. First his grain, then his land, then, when there was nothing else, his family. Debt bondage, people pledging their children, their spouses, and finally themselves into servitude to cover what they owed, is one of the oldest recorded consequences of money, and it appears almost the moment interest does. Here's the part that should genuinely surprise you. The ancient world understood this danger far better than we tend to assume, and they had a solution we've almost entirely forgotten. When debts piled up so high that too many people had fallen into bondage and society itself began to buckle, Mesopotamian rulers would simply cancel them. All of them. A clean slate. Historians have documented around 30 of these general debt cancellations between roughly 2400 and 1400 BC, the earliest recorded in the city of Lagash centuries before Hammurabi. Bondservants went home. Forfeited land was returned. The ledgers were wiped. Scholar Michael Hudson has spent decades showing that these clean slates weren't acts of charity, they were acts of survival, a periodic reset to stop debt from strangling the whole society. The famous biblical Jubilee, the command to forgive debts every 50th year, is a distant echo of this much older Mesopotamian practice. Ancient kings knew something our world has quietly chosen to forget. That debt, left to compound forever, will eventually consume everything. Notice what still hasn't shown up in this story. Coins. The thing most people picture when they imagine the invention of money, actual physical currency stamped with a face, came astonishingly late. The first true coins appear around 600 BC in Lydia, in what's now Turkey, more than 2,000 years after Sumerians were already recording debts on clay. And coins didn't appear to help chickens and shoemakers either. They spread through armies and states. A ruler could mint coins, use them to pay soldiers, and then demand those same coins back as taxes, which forced everyone in the kingdom to obtain currency, which meant working for the state or selling to its soldiers. Coinage wasn't born from the friendly marketplace. It was born from the war economy, a tool that tied money, armies, and taxation into a single machine. So here is the honest history, the one the textbook skips. Money did not arrive to rescue us from the inconvenience of barter, because there was no age of barter to be rescued from. Money arrived as a way to write down debt, to make human obligation precise. And once it was precise, it could be transferred to strangers, grown through interest and enforced by force. Every one of those steps made civilization more powerful and more capable of scale. And every one of them also pulled us a little further from the fuzzy, forgiving web of mutual obligation that our species had actually run on for most of its existence. And here's where this stops being ancient history and starts being about your life. Right now, today, because you still live in both systems at once. And you feel the friction between them constantly, even if you've never had a name for it. Think about the last time a close friend bought you dinner. You didn't pull out a calculator and pay them back the exact amount. That would feel cold, almost insulting, because between friends the vague Lingering, we'll get each other next time debt is the whole point. That's the ancient system, the one that binds people together, still running inside your closest relationships. But the moment you sign a lease, take out a loan, or watch the interest tick up on a credit card, you're inside the other system, the precise, transferable, enforceable one the Sumerians built. And that faint discomfort you feel when a casual acquaintance asks you to send them exactly $6.50 for your share, that tiny flicker of something being off, is real. It's the collision of two economies that have been fighting for the human soul for 5,000 years. So the next time money feels strangely cold, strangely impersonal, strangely capable of turning friends into creditors and neighbors into numbers, understand that you're not imagining it, and you're not being ungrateful. You're feeling exactly what money was built to do. It was never a neutral tool that simply made trade convenient. It was the invention that took the oldest, warmest thing about being human, our endless forgiving web of owing one another, and turned it into a number that could be measured, sold, multiplied, and enforced. That was one of the most powerful ideas our species ever had. It built cities, empires, and the entire modern world. And it may also have been, quietly, one of the worst, because we are still, all of us, living inside the debt it created.